$1,000 is the top dollar value for our first round. We are playing for cash. And here is our first puzzle. The category is phrase. Just before the show, we drew numbers to see who would start the game. And Alan, it's going to be you.
All right, come on. Come on, big money. Here we go. Come on now, big money. Come on.
200.
I'm ready, I know it.
Would you please solve this?
Squat dead.
Yeah, that's it.
How low should you squat? Should everyone squat to the same depth? Does it really even matter? Is squat depth just an arbitrary thing we all like to argue about? The reason I'm calling this Squat Depth Revisited is because I've said a lot about squat depth in the past 5 years of making YouTube videos. And since then, I've learned some things. I've worked with a lot of people, and I'm a little more experienced. You could say that I don't think the same way that I did 5 years ago. What is correct depth? Just about anywhere you look, you're gonna see crease of the hips below the top of the kneecap.
The crease of your hips breaks below the plane of the top of the patellas.
The hip crease below the knee joint.
Your hip joint has to go lower than your knee joint.
Her hips go just below her knees.
The apex of the hip crease drops just below the top of the patella.
What's cracking, guys? Crease of the hips below the top of the kneecap here. Back with another video. In this video today, crease of the hips below the top of the dang kneecap. Crease of the hips below the top of the freaking kneecap. And he proclaimed, crease of the hips below the top of the kneecap. Amen. Crease of the hips below the top of the kneecap.
Crease of the hips below the top of the kneecap.
Crease of the hips below the top of the kneecap.
So apparently we've decided that depth has been reached when the crease of your hips goes below the top of your kneecap. But why? I don't need this. Well, if you're a powerlifter, that's the rule. If you're trying to get your name up here on the board in Untamed Strength, the crease of your hips must go below the top of your kneecap. These arbitrary rules are necessary because it ensures you are aware of the standards you're being held to. But what about everyone else? Do you have to squat to powerlifting standards? Of course not. But if you plan on competing, I'd get used to it now. Even if you don't plan on competing, there is some benefit to squatting deep. For this video, I'll say that deep refers to powerlifting standards and lower. High refers to anything above that. Let's take a look at some studies. This study compared muscle activation between different knee joint angles during a max isometric back squat. Basically, a bunch of dudes did a max isometric back squat against a locked Smith machine with a high bar position, I might add. Sounds like a typical Tuesday night at Planet Fitness. They tested activation of rectus femoris, biceps femoris, glute max, vastus lateralis, and vastus medialis, which are all actually Tool albums. Conclusion, knee position alters muscle activation of the quadriceps and glute max muscles. An isometric back squat at 90 degrees generates the highest overall muscle activation. Yet an isometric back squat at 140 degrees generates the lowest overall muscle activation of the vastus lateralis and glute med only. Knee angles did not affect muscle activation of the hamstrings. Thus, we recommend performing an isometric squat at 90 degrees to maximize neuromuscular recruitment of the knee and hip extensors. Well, that's cool, but ain't nobody doing a max isometric back squat. Another study compared nearly the same thing but with dynamic squats, the kind that we do, and found that after 12 weeks, deep squat training resulted in superior increases in front thigh muscle compared to shallow squat training. In parallel with the larger increase in front thigh muscle, a superior increase in isometric knee extension strength and squat jump performance were observed in the deep squat group compared to the shallow squat group. Training deep squats elicited favorable adaptations on knee extensor muscle size and function compared to training shallow squats. It's believed that this could be caused by the longer time under tension in the deep squat versus shallow squat. And lastly, this study compared EMG activity of hips and thigh muscles while performing the back squat at 3 different depths, which we'll label as Hoff depth, Esoff depth, and Kennedy depth. There were no significant differences between the relative contributions of the biceps femoris, the VMO, and the vastus lateralis at different squatting depths during this phase. The results suggest that the gluteus maximus becomes more active in concentric contraction as squat depth increases. So a deep squat will prime the booty better than a shallow squat. But enough of this muscle activation talk. What is this, a Jeff Nippard video? As a side story, Greg Nuckols actually contacted me a while back to talk about muscle activation during the squat, among a number of other things, after he saw one of my squat videos. And I was like, honestly, I don't really care about that stuff. Look at me now, Greg. If you're a powerlifter, crease the hips below the top of the kneecap. Practice like you're expected to play. If you're a weightlifter, ass to grass squats. Actually, not really. If you're a weightlifter, you can squat however you want. Last time I checked, the squat is not a tested lift in weightlifting. It's just used as an exercise to improve your clean and jerk and snatch. Most people will say that weightlifters should squat ass to grass because that's the position you're gonna be in when you catch a heavy clean. I understand this and I'm not necessarily arguing against it, but in my opinion, which doesn't really matter because I'm not a weightlifting coach, you can get as specific as you want. If the bottom position of a clean isn't an issue for you, you don't necessarily always have to mimic that when you squat. I was compelled to talk about this because a recent video of me squatting with Ben Claridad and Silent Mike got some comments like, "Alan the only one squatting to depth." And I frequently see depth comments on other videos too. Omar Isof's recent 495 squat. "Nice squat, though you could go deeper. Is this IPF depth?" To which Omar responded, "This might come as a shock, but this is in fact not an IPF meet." And he's exactly right. We're all just here squatting. Can we stop pausing, replaying, zooming in, asking friends, posting an IG poll about was this depth or no? Sometimes a lifter will squat down as low as they can without relaxing or losing balance, and it's still not powerlifting depth because of their technique, style, or anthropometry. Trying to remain very vertical and pushing your knees forward as far as you can will only allow you to go down so far. Look at Mike's squat. A picky judge might give this a red light, but Mike has been squatting with a pretty narrow stance, toes pointing nearly straight forward. If he were to sink these squats any lower, he would probably get on his toes, or he'd have to round his back to get his butt lower. Check out this dude, Ilya Ilyin. He's a local mediocre weightlifter who can do this. Check out this front squat session. OMG. Not to depth. Ben's squat could possibly get called in a meet, according to YouTube comments, but this isn't a powerlifting meet. He's got great control over his balance, his position, throughout all of these reps. They're excellent squats, regardless of what YouTube thinks. And, for what it's worth, he did just do a front squat competition where he got 3 white lights for a 485 front squat. How about Con Air? Meh. This could be called for depth and probably would be called for depth. But look at how far forward his knees are. They're probably at the very end range of flexion. There's not a whole lot more he can do with this. Now, does all this mean these guys are wasting their time? They're not getting any training effect out of these squats? Should they just deload to the empty bar and work on technique? Absolutely not. All of these squats will elicit the training response they're looking for, even if they appear to be half an inch above IPF depth. If they did want to sink these squats lower, they would probably have to take a slightly wider stance, greater toe angle, maybe push their knees out more, maybe even sit their hips back and bend over a little bit. That's if they were competing in a powerlifting meet and it really mattered. But for the sake of training, these squats are fine. I want to add that squatting to powerlifting depth, or just as low as you can while staying tight and maintaining balance, is advantageous from an efficiency standpoint. This is something that Greg Nuckols has written about somewhere on his website. Squatting deep allows you to use the natural bounce that occurs at the bottom of the squat, the stretch reflex. The sticking point of a failed squat or a really slow, grindy squat is never at the lowest point unless you're squatting way over your max and you get completely stapled at the bottom. The sticking point is usually a couple inches above 90 degrees. If you can time that bounce, you will arrive at your sticking point with more momentum and more speed, thus making it easier to push through. To wrap this up, I think that depth is a bit different for everyone. If you can stay balanced, maintain your torso position, keep your feet flat on the ground, and squat like Clarence Kennedy, go ahead. If this means you're just barely at IPF depth, so be it. Don't force depth at the expense of bracing, positioning, and balance. Now, if you're quarter squatting, I got nothing for you. That needs to be fixed. Every person that I've worked with at Untamed Strength, at a seminar or a workshop, has had the ability to get the crease of their hips below the top of their kneecap or very close to it with some coaching and adjustments.
Well, that's it. We went about as deep as I wanted to on this topic. Anyways, thanks for watching. Until next time, always remember, tread on time.